learn lessons. It takes years for us to learn lessons that perfect us. How many jobs does a person have to lose before they stop worrying about money and believe it when God says he would take care of them? They maybe had to crash into that boulder in the middle of the river many times before that rough edge fell away. As you can see, just like the stones, we get tumbled about by events in our life. They don't make sense sometimes until much later when we're smooth and round. Now, let's say we've tumbled and learned hard lessons from difficult events or tragedies in our life. And due to this, we've let go of things that are sharp edges like hatred, racism, or greed. And just like this rough rock, when we let go of those things, it's like the water rushes over us and smooths away a rough edge. So maybe we've also learned to pause in our judgment of others or found that giving back is greater than receiving. And the water rushes over us and smooths more rough edges away. We study and learn about God and how to become more like Jesus. The water rushes over us and smooths more rough edges away. Then we arrive at this rounded state, nice and smooth. And we might think we've made it because we think, oh, there's nothing left to learn. I mean, I'm perfectly smooth and round now, right? Ready to go. But there is one more stage I want to talk to you about. We need to go through our transformation and we need to hone our faith like a laser against a hard stone. And sometimes this can be the most difficult challenge we ever face in life. Why? Because many times this requires us to go against our nature, and that's the most ingrained part of our soul. How many of you have seen the movie A Knight's Tale? It's one of my favorites. There's a scene there where the knight's trying to impress his beautiful lady by telling her he will win the next tournament for her, that his prowess in fighting and winning will be for her. But she recognizes that he really wants to win for himself. It's not really a gift for her. So she tells him, if you love me, you will go against your nature and desire to win. If you love me, you will lose. Now I'll let you watch the movie to see how that turned out. But I've always thought about that when we think about how we think what we want is the right thing, but it's part of a human nature. How hard is it to go against our human nature? It's very, very hard. I mean, we might naturally have the urge to fight back when someone hits or hurts us, to sharpen our tone when someone irritates us. We might feel the need to accumulate a lot of money so we can have the things that make life fun and easy. It's also our human nature to fear death or crave love. I mean, the list goes on and on. I'm sure you can think of some things. Our human nature focuses on thinking of our life as a culmination of going to school, getting a job, making some money, maybe finding a spouse, having a family, buying a car, and then retiring and traveling for fun. Folks, that's not the focus of life for Christians. God's great plan is to defeat evil once and for all. And everything here is leading up to that. So he can gather us at home in the end and have peace at last. We're fighting alongside him. And things that happen along our path are there to strengthen us, educate us, and prepare us to join him in heaven. Making heaven our goal is one of the most important parts of this last stage. Look, before we go any further, let's dispel this common image that heaven is some boring, cloudy place where we just float around and play a harp all day. If we don't really want to go to heaven, then when we're faced with death and losing our earthly life, it could seem like the greatest tragedy of all. The fear of death is the devil's tool, and he uses it to sap our joy and slash holes in our faith. Jesus died to release us from that fear, and that is acknowledged when we make heaven our goal. There are enough references in the Bible to show us that heaven will be beyond our imagination's magnificent if you piece them all together, and you'll be in the midst of beauty and peace abundantly. We'll never have to worry again. One of the things I always think about is the amazing people I'll be able to talk to in heaven. Can you imagine inviting Mary over to your mansion and asking her what it was like to have an angel tell her she would bear the Messiah as a virgin? Think of the feast and the laughter and the love flowing through that kingdom forever and ever. Think of being with loved ones where we'll never lose them again. Our flawed and painful bodies will be gone, and we'll have a new body perfected by God. I mean, I can't even begin what it would be to just, sit down and talk to people like Moses or Abraham, Sarah, or even the Apostle Paul. But more than all that, can you imagine just being able to lay your head on the breast of Jesus? Can you imagine what complete and utter joy you would feel to just close your eyes and really, truly rest in his loving arms? Yeah, I'm living for that. So this last chapter of the story of stones is building on our past lessons more fully, recognizing our goal is heaven, deepening our wisdom and knowledge of God, learning to go against our flawed human natures. In other words, honing our faith. We're able to love in the face of hate, to give up worldly desires and focus on things above, to let go of worries and sorrows and trust God. It's very hard, I know. I mean, for myself, it was instilled in me at a young age that if you didn't worry, you would actually jinx something bad into happening, right? Did you ever feel that way? Like my mom, she thought it was a sin not to worry. And I'm still working on that rough edge. It's so hard. We get into those situations of tragedy and question why God won't answer our prayer. And may even get to the point of doubting, does God even exist to let this horrible thing happen? But folks, sometimes things happen that are part of God's larger plan, things he can't change or it will mess up that plan. As I said before, his plan is to defeat evil once and for all and bring his people home to heaven. We don't and can't understand the intricacies of that plan right now. So we have to have faith in him to guide us. And our act of faith is to not worry and be joyful. And it's hard. If you find yourself in a situation where you question why God has not answered your prayer, if you constantly question why a loving God would let terrible things like war and poverty and child abuse happen in this world, I want you to stop. Stop for a minute and think of Jesus, God's precious son. He knew he was about to endure one of the most horrible, painful deaths that can be imagined. He was going to have nails driven into his body and hang with his whole body weight dragging down on those nails. He wouldn't even be able to take a soothing breath of cool air because the weight of his body had compressed his lungs to the point there was no room for drawing in a breath. God knew this was going to happen too. So even knowing the crucifixion was going to happen, it was still something Jesus desperately dreaded, and who wouldn't? So he prayed to his Father. He prayed so hard to God to let him avoid being crucified that his sweat became as great drops of blood. Now, if you have children, you know that you would do anything to keep them from being harmed. And if they came to you in tears and said, "Mommy, Daddy, please don't let this thing hurt me," you would make sure that you didn't let it happen, right? Now imagine how hard it was for God to not answer his son's prayer. God did let death claim his son, his precious only son, and it proves his overwhelming, never-ending love for us. But he had to let it happen because it was part of his overall plan to save us. If it hadn't happened, there would be no Christianity. But yes, God does answer prayers, but when he doesn't answer the way we think he should, we have to assume that it's because there's a reason. And if we can learn to accept that, as hard as it may be, our faith deepens. The laser slices away a piece of our hard outer shell. Each time we choose joy over sadness, each time we trust God to provide when we have nothing, each time we put aside our doubts and just let him lead, those are like the precise cuts of a laser, slicing off those last vestiges of flawed beliefs and thoughts. When our faith is honed to perfection, even from this smooth outer shell that we developed in the river of life, then we find that perfect jewel inside. And it looks more like this. It's just like when you cut away all the flawed pieces of a stone and you reveal a stunning diamond that sends forth rainbows of beautiful light. We can become the polished, perfect soul that joins God, Jesus, and all the saints in heaven. Now, going back to the passage from James that was read this morning, I think it can come across in two ways, and that I really did agonize over how to present this message as one of hope. It may sound comforting to some and harsh to others. My belief is that it comes down to where you are on your personal stone journey. As more is revealed to us of God's plan along our journey, the more we understand the process of events. See, you might be here at the end. You might be approaching jewel status or even at jewel status, where you've endured and you've honed and you've done everything along the way that leads you to this perfect laser cut, beautiful stone. And you take comfort in James' verse for all that you've endured, and you can actually finally be grateful for the tears and the pain and the hard lessons that led you to this point. You can see past events as the learning experiences that they were. But you also might be in this rough stage, or even unbetween, or, in the smooth zone, where your transformation is not complete. You may still need some rough edges knocked off or some chunks of your smooth shell lasered away. You still have some lessons to learn and wisdom to gain. In this stage, it may be more difficult for you to accept the hardships of life. You could even feel chastised by this verse in James because you simply can't find the joy. And you question God and have doubts. And your friends, they may nod and say, "Oh, you're having a crisis of faith." But those people who smugly nod may be wrong. The truth is, these hardships may actually be a period of deepening of your faith. This is a complicated concept, I know, but it's one I felt called to talk with you about today because I believe in all my heart that God does want you to live in joy. Even if we have times when our faith feels stretched to the limit, even when we curse our doubts, knowing how it wounds God, even if we can't summon up even a thread of joy in the midst of tragedy. Know that he still loves us and is tender with us. He's going to wait for us to transform. I want you to think about this story from Genesis that you may have overlooked, because it's kind of a small thing. But when you think about it, it becomes a big thing. So you remember Adam and Eve, they eat of the tree that God forbade them to eat and realize they're naked. Out of shame, they make themselves clothes out of leaves, a pretty pitiful type of clothing, I'm sure. Because, as a child, we all tried to put leaves together. I think I used pine needles to try to sew it like thread. And they would always fall apart. It didn't work too well. Well, here's Adam and Eve in their tattered leaf clothing, hiding, trembling at their horrible disobedience. God finds them and he basically lays serious curses on them for their disobedience. Serious. If you've read this passage, you know that God is extremely angry with them. Their lack of faith in him ruined every beautiful thing he'd given them. But he still cared for them. And listen to this tenderness. He sees their pitiful leaf clothing that are probably falling apart at that point and surely not comfortable. And despite the fact that they have just served him the greatest of betrayals, he makes them clothes out of animal skin. I mean, just think about how tender he is to them after what they did. Do you think God loves you any less? Do you think your moments of doubt are in any way as hurtful as the unfaithful consequences of Adam and Eve disobeying you? So hopefully you can start thinking of this concept of hardships in life in a different way, because it can lead to greater joy and deeper faith. I want you to feel the love of God and know that he's always there, patiently, tenderly waiting for you to find your way through your personal stone story until you're finally revealed as that perfect jewel he will lovingly gather home. Proverbs chapter 3, 5-6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not depend on your own understanding. Seek his will in all you do, and he will show you which path to take. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 7-10. We now have this light shining in our hearts, but we ourselves are like fragile clay jars containing this great treasure. This makes it clear that our great power is from God, not from ourselves. We are pressed on every side by troubles, but we are not crushed. We are perplexed, but not driven to despair. We are hunted down, but never abandoned by God. We get knocked down, but we are not destroyed. Through suffering, our bodies continue to share in the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be seen in our bodies. My challenge to you, my beloved brothers and sisters, is to continue your stone journey, your stone story. Stay in the river, despite the tumbles and pain. Let the water rush over you and smooth away the rough edges of your flawed human nature. Let loose the outer flaws of worry and doubt. Trust God and trust his path for you. Walk in faith and sing his praises even in the bad times. Allow joy to bloom in your heart and become the shining, perfect jewel you were meant to be. To God be the glory, always. Amen.